Hello, today we're going to work on lesson 9 and we're going to learn to rewrite equations into slope-intercept form, and this is page 17. It is often easier to deal with a linear equation that's written in slope-intercept form, particularly when graphing. However, equations are always not given to us in that form. So today we'll discuss several different steps we can take to rewrite an equation into slope-intercept form. So what is slope-intercept form? Well, if you recall from our previous linear equations unit, we start with y equals, and then we have a coefficient of x. We refer to that as m plus b, which is called the y-intercept. And this number, whether it's positive or negative, we use our plus signs as positive, our minus signs as negative, is the y-intercept. And that tells us where a point is on the y-axis. For instance, if it's 4, positive 4, we would locate 0, 4, the point 0, 4 on the y-axis. That's our starting point. And then the slope we would write as a fraction. We need a rise over run number, and we'd be able, from the y-intercept, to start graphing a line. Say the slope was 2, well, from the y-intercept, we'd go up 2 and to the right 1. And we continuously do that until we've built a line. So that's why we'd like these equations in slope-intercept form. So as you look, you can tell that this is close, but not quite. And so this is a pretty easy fix. We just need to move this term, including its sign, here. And we need to move this term here. So we're going to keep the y. Because that's plus 3x, we're going to use it as positive 3x. Because this is positive 9, we're going to use it as plus 9. So please copy that down. We're going to do the same thing for the next 3 examples. So I'm going to move this time I see a minus sign, so that's going to move as a negative in this spot. And this 7 is positive, so it's going to be plus 7. So we're going to write y equals negative 2x. We always have to be careful with signs. Positive 7, so we're going to write as plus 7. And it's very common for students to see this minus and want to just drop it down. The signs travel with the term behind it. So using that same procedure, we're going to look at this. If you would like to write a 1 in front of it, you can. So negative 1x or minus 1, negative 1x or just negative x, we're going to move to the first position. And negative 3, we're going to move to the second position, but we're going to make it minus 3. So this would look like this, negative 1x minus 3. Or we could write it as y equals negative x minus 3. So now I'd like you to try A, B, and C on your own. I will post the key at the end of the lesson, but please try it without looking at the key. For this next set of equations, we need to isolate y by dividing y by the coefficient of y, whatever they give us the number next to y. And we have to show this on both sides of the equation for each term. So this is something that more than likely will be a little bit new to you. When we divide on one side of the equation, we have to divide everything on the other side of the equation. So we're going to start by building our wall, as we normally would. We want to eliminate the coefficient of 3 next to y, so we're going to divide, because side by side is multiplying. Now we're going to divide, but we have to divide the entire other side by 3. So on this left side, we're kind of used to seeing this. So this is y equals, and now here's where it gets a little bit tricky. This is like having 12x divided by 3, because this number, the 3 divides that term, plus 21 divided by 3. So we have y equals 12 divided by 3 is 4. We just drop down the x along with it. And 21 divided by 3 is 7, so plus 7. So we now have this equation in slope-intercept form. Now let's look at the next one. Again, a little bit tricky because I see a negative, and that's going to really cause us some issues if we're not careful. So we're going to build our wall to start out. Again, I'm trying to isolate y by itself, so we do that by eliminating -2. We divide because we see multiplication, but we have to divide everything on this side by -2. So negative divided by a negative is a +1, and I have y equals. So now 6x divided by -2. So I'm just going to go ahead and write this like 6x divided by -2. But I'm also going to look at my -4, kind of like a -4. So I'm going to write that as -4 divided by -2. And whatever answer I get, I'm going to use that integer sign as my operation sign. So I'm going to keep my y. +6 divided by -2 would be -3. So I'm going to write -3x. +4, -4, my fault, divided by -2 would be positive. So it's going to be +2. So I'm going to write that +2 as +2. And so now we have this in slope-intercept form. Let's try our last one. We're going to start by building our wall. We want the coefficient of y to eliminate, so we're going to divide by 4. And we're going to do that on both sides, the entire side. So now this eliminates, leaving y. And 3x divided by 4, we're going to deal with that in just a minute. And then -8 divided by 4. So -8 divided by +4, or I could just drop down the minus. In the last case, I would have been a minus, a negative, and a minus, which we would have had to turn into a plus anyway. So now we're going to deal with this 3/4, or 3 divided by 4. 4 won't go into 3 evenly. And if you recall, when we're working with slope, we want a rise number and we want a run number. So we're just going to pull that fraction 3/4 out exactly as it is. We don't want to turn it into a decimal, because when we work on the graphing, we want a rise and run number. So that's 3/4 x. And then we have a -8 divided by a +4, which is going to give us a negative. And I'm going to use that negative as a minus sign. So 8 divided by 4 would be 2. And so this is now in slope-intercept form. So once again, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and continue and turn to page 18, and please try D, E, and F on your own. Again, the key is posted, but I'd like you to try it first and then check your results. If you need to make corrections, you can. Finally, the next series of equations require us to use inverse operations and solving steps in order to isolate y on the left side of the equation. We're not solving to find a numeric answer. The goal is to isolate y on one side of the equation. And the first couple times we do this, I'm going to be honest, it might be very uncomfortable for you, because it's not like usual solving where we combine two numbers and get one result. We're just basically moving pieces around, but we have to do it the proper way because we're moving across the equal sign. So we're going to go ahead and build our wall. In this first problem, we want y by itself, and this pesky 9 is in the way. So we can remove it by taking it away. And because there's a plus sign here, that's going to leave a positive y, or just y. So I'm going to take it away on this side, but I must always balance my equation and take it away on this side. So we've met our goal by eliminating it here, and I have plus y, or positive y, which I can drop down as just y. Now here's where it gets a little bit tricky. 4x and 9 are two different types of terms. They're not like terms, so I cannot put them together. I cannot combine them, but I can keep them separate. So I'm going to write 4x on its own, and I'm going to write minus 9 on its own. And if you look at that now, we do indeed have an equation in slope-intercept form. So let's look at that again. We're going to build our wall. We would like for y to be isolated. Now this one's a little bit tricky and we'll talk about it. We are going to first, I can see the y here, but it has a minus sign and we'll talk about that afterwards. I need to eliminate this term. This pesky term is in the way. So we're going to take it away. I'm going to take away the entire term. And I know this feels uncomfortable. We're not used to doing this. However, if you recall variables on both sides, we have done this before. The result is going to be negative y. And so I'm going to put a 1 in front of that. We're going to have to deal with that negative or that minus coming up. And now if I look at this, I have an 8 and I have a negative 3x. These are unlike terms. I cannot put them together. I can't take 8 minus 3. I could only do that if the x wasn't there or if this had an x on it. So they have to stay separate. And if you recall, we like to have our x term first. So I'm going to write negative 3x, and then it's a positive 8, so I'm going to add 8. So we're almost done. Almost looks like slope-intercept form, but this pesky negative 1, or this negative y, is going to cause us some issues. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 1. So on the left side, we've met our goal. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. So we want a positive 1, y. So now we have y isolated. That's our main goal. And on the other side, I want this to look like slope-intercept form. And it did before we divided by negative 1. But we have to remember, we divide negative 3 by negative 1. That's going to give us a positive 3x. And we divide positive 8 by negative 1. And that's going to give us a negative 8. So this is the form we needed to go on. This was a little bit more, quite a bit more complicated than the last one. All right, so let's try our final problem together. So we're going to build the wall. I want y by itself, but I have two things I'm going to have to tackle. I'm going to have to tackle that coefficient, but first I have to get rid of this x term. I don't want it to be on this side, so we're going to mathematically take it away. And because it's negative, we eliminate it by adding 6x. We do the opposite of what we see. Or you can think of this as being negative 6x, positive 6x. So I have to do exactly the same thing on this side. So we've eliminated it. We now have left minus 2y, so we're going to drop that down as negative 2y. And because we like to see our x term first, we cannot put 14 and 6x together. They're different terms. So I'm going to put the 6x first. It's positive, so I'm just going to write it's plus. I'm going to write it as positive. 14 is also positive, so I'm going to write that as plus 14. So this kind of looked like slope-intercept form, but I have this pesky negative 2 now I have to deal with. So I'm going to divide this side by negative 2. And I have to do exactly the same thing on this side. I'm going to divide this whole entire side by negative 2. So negative divided by negative is a positive. Positive 1 gives me 1y, which is the same thing as y. On this side, 6x divided by negative 2, or 6 divided by negative 2 is going to be negative 3. Now we bring down the x. And then positive 14 divided by negative 2, that's going to give me a negative 7. So this is now in slope-intercept form. These are by far the hardest because we not only have to eliminate a term on the same side with the y, we often have to take another step. So please Go ahead and try J through I on your own and look at the key and make corrections if needed. Take care.